All right, welcome. Today, we're going to put on our detective hats and solve some of the most frustrating IT mysteries you'll ever run into in vSphere. So first things first, let's examine the scene of the crime. And this is our crime scene. You know the one. It's a complex system, a really critical failure, and a bunch of confusing symptoms that seem to come out of absolutely nowhere. It's a classic case, and it lands on every single system admin's desk sooner or later. So you're the detective, you've got this messy case with baffling clues. Where do you even begin? Well, before any good detective hits the streets, they need two things: the right tools and a really good map of the city. Without those, you're just going to be chasing dead ends all day. So let's start with our map. This is probably the single most important tool for any investigation. We need to understand the two fundamental districts of our vSphere city. We're talking about the control plane and the data plane. So first up is the control plane. The easiest way to think about this is like City Hall. It's where you, the admin, issue commands. It's where vCenter lives, where all the policies get set, and where the entire infrastructure is managed and coordinated. It's all about making decisions. And then you have the data plane. Now, if the control plane is City Hall, the data plane is all the highways, the power lines, the plumbing of your city. This is where the real work actually gets done, where your virtual machines are sending network packets, accessing their storage, and where services like vMotion are moving huge amounts of data around. So here's the bottom line, and this is so critical. Just knowing which plane a problem is on is your first big win. If you can't log into vCenter, well, that's a control plane issue. But if your VM is slow or offline, but vCenter itself looks totally fine, your investigation needs to start in the data plane. Just making that one distinction can save you hours of chasing the wrong clues. Now, just like in any good crime drama, every investigation has its usual suspects, right? The ones who are responsible for most of the trouble. Well, in vSphere, it's really no different. Before you go looking for some complex, exotic cause, you absolutely have to check these three first. Your first three stops, every single time, should be DNS, NTP, and certificates. You can think of this as the identity and time layer. Can services find each other by name? Is everyone's clock synchronized? And crucially, can they prove who they are with valid certificates? Trust me, ignoring these foundational services is a classic rookie mistake. And this is where things get tricky, because these problems love to wear disguises. You'll see an error about an untrusted connection, and your brain immediately jumps to network failure, right? But it's not. It's an identity crisis. Server A knows exactly where it's going, but Server B has no idea who Server A is, and it doesn't trust it. That's a direct clue pointing you straight to a problem with names and certificates. Okay, and this is where it gets really fascinating, because a tiny crack in one of those foundational layers, one of our usual suspects, can create a massive, confusing earthquake in the layers above it. Let's trace exactly how that can happen. And this just illustrates the cascade perfectly. It starts small, right? A certificate expires. No big deal? Well, suddenly, vCenter can't trust its connection to an ESXi host. That destabilizes the entire control plane. Now, management tests start failing, and maybe even high availability stops working the way it should. A tiny little identity problem has just caused a huge operational headache. So here's the big diagnostic question you need to ask yourself. If the answer is yes, if your workloads are humming along just fine, but you can't seem to manage anything, your investigation should immediately zoom in on the control plane and that underlying identity layer. Don't waste your time looking at the data plane where the VMs live. Okay, enough theory. Let's put our new detective skills to the test with a couple of quick-fire cases. Let's see how this framework actually helps us figure out the root cause. So the call comes in, you dig into the logs, and you see this error message. What's your first move, detective? Where do you even start looking? Yes, exactly. You got it. Those keywords, certificate, handshake, not trusted, they are practically screaming at you that this is an identity and trust problem. You check the certs and their names long before you waste a single second checking network connectivity. All right, next case. The control plane seems totally fine. You can log in, you can see everything, but a very specific action, vMotion, just keeps failing over and over. Now, what does this pattern of evidence suggest to you? Bingo. Perfect deduction. You've correctly figured out this has to be a data plane problem. vMotion uses its own dedicated VM kernel network. It has its own private highway. So you should immediately suspect an issue on that specific path, something like a mismatched MTU size or a VLAN configuration error. And you've got to remember, the clues you're looking for will change based on your specific environment. With vSAN, for instance, the network is the storage fabric. So if you see storage alarms, your very first check should be the vSAN network health. But if you're using an external array, you'd start by checking the dedicated storage fabric paths. The tech underneath changes your first step. Okay, so let's wrap this case up. Here's your detective's takeaway. Remember, symptoms are just clues. Your job is to use this mental map. First, isolate the problem to either the control or data plane. Then, always check the usual suspects, DNS, NTP, and certs before you do anything else. And finally, understand how a small crack in the foundation can cause the whole building to shake. And I'll leave you with this final thought. What if the real problem isn't that the system is broken, but that your map of the city is incomplete? The single best tool you can possibly have is this mental model. Continuously building and refining your own map of how your environment works. That's what's going to elevate you from just a technician into a master detective.